Hello, Steven here, and welcome back. So today I'm going to be setting up a new sandbox environment because I'm moving servers to a new server, and the server's set up, ready to go, just needs to get set up with my sandbox. So my sandbox, or setting up my sandbox, I like to use Docker, and Docker's helpful because I can create containers for different database platforms or different tools where I can quickly get them stood up, start playing with them, start learning them, and start utilizing them so I can figure out how I want to use those tools in a production environment. So that's what we're going to be working with today. And in order to manage Docker, we're going to be setting up a Portainer container, which is going to be our management interface for taking care of Docker. Now you can definitely work with Docker at the CLI, which I've done plenty of before, but most people prefer to play with UI in order to do things, especially if it can, they're not familiar with the CLI a lot, so it's a good way to get going. But there is a little bit of CLI work to do. So let's go ahead and look at what we need to do to get Portainer stood up and running so that we can start using it to set up our containers. All right. So first thing we need to do is we need to jump over to the Docker website, and you want to make sure on your server you get Docker installed. So if you're not familiar with it, just go to docs.docker.com, and from here go to download and install. Take the route of your environment. So mine is going to be a Linux install. And then down below, for myself, my server setup is on a Ubuntu distro. And from here, it's actually pretty well. I've done a CentOS one as well. And all you need to do is just walk through here. And once you're in your own, the correct install, then go ahead and start following the directions. And they have it laid out pretty well here. Set up the repository, getting the G keys, and just getting the installation going up and running. And you don't have to do much there. Now, if you like working with the CLI, you also want to take an extra step after you get Docker installed. You want to jump down here to Docker Compose, and you'll want to do the install compose, pick your environment, and then go ahead and follow the instructions for getting Docker Compose installed. All right, so once you have Docker installed, you should be able to get to a command line. And once you have it installed, you'll know, because once you go to your command line, let's go ahead and jump on over to the server here. So here in mobile Xterm, we should be able to say sudo docker ps. Make sure you have your password. And there we go. So we know it's running because we're able to get the list of any containers that are running. In your instance, you won't have a container running yet. In my case, though, I already have a Portainer container running for Portainer Community Edition. And now let's go ahead and look at how we set that up. So jump back over to the web, and back in our browser here. Next, we want to go to portainer.io. And then you'll be introduced to this page here. From here, you jump over to Install Community Edition. We're going to go, and in this case, I'm doing a Docker installed, so just a single server. And then for my case, I want to do a Portainer server deployment, not just the agent. So in this case, you run these two at the CLI. So the first command creates a volume for Portainer, and the second one creates the container itself, and it actually starts up two different parts. So you get your server running, and you're connected, and you're good to go. Now you do want to pay attention to your Docker ports. So on the left-hand side, we have our host machine port. On the right-hand side, we have the port that it's being mapped to inside of the container. So Docker by default is set up to utilize port 8000 for the UI. If I remember correctly, let's go up here. No, UI is 9000, 8000 is the TCP tunnel. Okay, so you want to make sure you set that up correctly. And in my case, that's what I did. So you just take these, you run them from the command line, and you're good to go. I'm not going to do that because I already have it up and running. All right, so once you have it up and running, you should see what we just looked at on my side, which was at the command line here. After I started it, you can see that my container is up and running, and it's been up for a couple days. Yours will be a couple seconds. You're mapping for your ports that you're exposing on your container. In my case, I'm actually mapping from my host machine 12,000 to the container's port of 8,000, and then 12,001 to 9,000. So my UI will be on 12,001. All right, so let's go ahead and jump back over to the website, and let's go ahead and connect to the UI for Portainer. All right, so the first time you go into Portainer, you are going to be greeted with the admin setup, and that will require you to, so before you get to the home screen here, it'll pop up, you set up the admin password, and you're good to go, and then you'll be brought here to the home screen. So from here, you can see your environment, which in my case is my local machine. I have 0 stacks running. I have 1 container running, which is the Portainer container for the community edition. And then I have a volume, which was created during that setup. And the one image I have is going to be that Portainer image that got downloaded in order to get the container up and running. And you can see a little bit of extra information. There's 32 cores available on this machine. And there's available in the environment 135 gigs of RAM. So we're doing good there. Let's go ahead and click on that. And here we are. So we have another breakdown. We can see how many stacks we have, images, networks are running, containers, and volumes. So what I want to do next, though, is start setting up my sandbox. So in my sandbox, I want to have quite a few things up and running all the time. I have the ability to take them down and up whenever I want using this. And we can see here in containers, right, here's our list of containers. And I want to start getting everything installed. So the first thing I want to install is a MySQL server. So I have that available in my sandbox at all times. And when using Portainer.io, there's a section in here called App Templates. So we can go ahead and go there, and we can see they already have some containers that are pre-set up as templates. So you can go ahead and just run these if you want, and you can have a container set up pretty quickly. Now so if we go over here, we can go to MySQL, click on that, we can see we give our container a name, the network type that we want to set up for it, which I'm just leave default to the bridge, the root password for your container. And then there's an option down here to look at show advanced options. So this is where if I want to set up my port mapping to map my host port to the internal port of 3306, which is the defaults for MySQL, and the volume mapping as well. Keep in mind though, when you use this volume mapping, so a volume will be created, but you want to make sure if you want it to persist, so this will create a default one, give it a name. It will persist, but you can easily delete it if you need to as well. In this case though, I kind of want to organize my volumes. So I'm going to go over here, I'm going to create some volumes. First one I'm going to create will be MySQL, and I'm going to leave everything else default. Create another volume. This one's going to be Microsoft SQL server. I have that one made. I have another volume. This one is going to be a MongoDB volume. And I'm going to have Redis installed as well. And I think these are all the ones I'm going to create manually because I'm going to be using the app templates. So let's go ahead and jump back over there, but we can see we have a volume all created. None of them are used right now. They're not part of any stacks or anything, but they are locally mounted. So they exist inside of the Docker root under volumes, and then their container name or the volume name, and then underscore data. So that's where they exist on my host machine if I wanted to go look at those directories. All right, so first thing I want to do is go up to app templates, and I want to install my first one. So I want to go ahead and use the MySQL just because there's nothing wrong with it. I'm going to give it a name. I'm going to give my password for my root, called time trap. Show advance. Okay, so I'm going to do something a little different here. You can do whatever suits your needs. But for my environment on my local machine, I want to use the host port of 12002, mapping it to 3306. Because I have open on my server a block of IPs that I want to use specifically for this sandbox. And then we can see here volume mapping. So we want to change this too. So I want to change it to volume. I want to click on the drop down. Now we can see all the volumes we created. So this is why we created them. So I want to go ahead and pick my SQL. And I'm good to go with everything else. Go ahead and click on the deploy. Wait a minute while it does its deployment of the container. So this involves it reaching out to the Docker Hub, downloading the container image, and then deploying the container with the settings that we have here. So we just need to give it a moment to do that. Depending on how big the download is, there you go. The container successfully created. Redirects us back to the container screen. We can see here we have MySQL up. We can go ahead and click on the logs for quick actions here. We can see it's set to auto refresh, so we can monitor our log screen here as everything is created. All right, so we can also get some extra information if we go back in container while that's starting up. And we can go ahead and click on the container. From here, we get basic information. So it's been running for a few seconds here, when it was started or created and started last, the IP address to it. So it's the local IP inside the network it's a part of. And we'll look at that down below here. We also have the option to look at logs, inspect the container, set up the stats on that container. So we can see CPU usage, network usage, and memory usage, what processes are up and running. Go ahead and go back here one level. Scrolling down below, you can see the image. We're not creating an image here or anything, so that's kind of irrelevant for us, but we can see the container details. So we can see the image that was used was MySQL latest. And then we can see the port configuration that we had set up. So local 12, or the host machine 12002, mapped internally to the container at 3306. You can see the command and entry points that were utilized. And then we can see the other information, right? So our environment variables that were set up as part of this container's configuration. Here's our root password for the root user. And then we can see our path, and then some version information as well. So very helpful. And scroll down a little bit more, we can see the volume that's being utilized. So that's the volume we created, and it did pick it. And we can see it joined the bridge network. So this network was already created by Docker. So it's part of that network. And here's the IP address inside that network and the gateway for it, the MAC address and all that good information. All right, so now container's up and running. Well, let's verify that we're good to go here, shall we? So what I want to do is, first of all, go ahead and go back up here, check out the log. We can see it looks like it's all done. It's ready for us to utilize. There we go. Port 3306. So as you can see here, it's talking about port 3306, which is internal to the container and what it sees. But we know we want to connect to 12002 in order to get to this container and utilize it. So I could jump over here, and we're going to jump over to dbeaver. Let me start that up real quick. And here it is. Okay, so here in dbeaver, I've already created all my connections to my servers. So we should be able to use the same one that I had from earlier. So MySQL, go ahead and open that up. Oh wait, password's changed. So got the wrong password here. I'm going to go ahead and edit that connection. And ports right, root, password. And go ahead and test it. We're good to go. All right, so now open it back up. We're connected. We have our connection. Databases, we can see the information schema, performance. So that installation is up and running and everything is okay. In fact, we could even run a quick on the information schema view. There we go. Oh, let's do. There we go. So we're able to query. Everything's working fine. All right. So that's all we needed to do here. Let's go ahead and jump back over now to Portainer. And we're going to go back up to our containers. So that's our first one, right? We got MySQL running. So I like getting these all installed and up and running for the containers because most cases they don't take a ton of resources. You do have the option quickly to go ahead and select a container, stop it, kill it, pause it, restart it if you want, or remove it completely and be done with it. So you can take them down and start them back up pretty quickly. You can also see from the main container screen here, we can see the information about the images and the published ports that are being utilized. So we can see those quickly and get to them. All right, so that takes care of that one. Now for my environment, for my sandbox, I also want to install my next server. So back to app templates, and let's go ahead and get the next one done. So we'll go through this one a lot quicker. And that was going to be a Mongo. My Mongo port is right there. I'm going to select the volume I want to use and deploy. So I'm using the the templates they already have set up as part of Portainer. They have a couple in there, so we'll do that. And then we'll get to setting up a couple custom ones. We'll have to use a custom one when we go to set up our Apache Nifi container. So just give that time. It's done. It's running. So we should be okay there. It still takes a little bit of time to get going the very first time normally, just because it's got to good set things up, sometimes create folders and all that good stuff. Looks like it's already listening though. So we should be able to jump out. I can jump on over to dbeaver. And inside dbeaver, I can check my Mongo connection. And there we go. My connection is successful using the default information that I had set up from before. All right, so let's jump back over now and go back to Portainer. Get our next container set up. So in my environment, I also want to have a Redis server set up. And that is so that I can use that with Apache Nifi as a caching service in order to pull in key value pairs pretty quickly. So there's a way to do that inside of Apache Nifi. So I'll go back to my app templates, scroll down until I find Redis. There it is. Give it a name. Check my options, grab the port number I want to use next. Pick the volume that I created earlier for it. And there we go. That one's done. Go ahead and deploy it. Make sure I didn't miss anything. Oh, looks good to me. Okay, so that one's going too, so I'm not going to waste time checking on that one. Let's go ahead and check out, let's see, I want to set up a Microsoft SQL Server as well. So inside of our apps templates, we can scroll on down and we see we have a couple. We have SQL Server, and this is the Linux distribution of it in a container. There's a Windows version of it as well for Windows containers, which is, I can't use that one, but I can use the Linux one. And there's an Express version for the Windows container too. So I'm going to pick my template that I want, which is the Linux version. And look at my port list here. So my next port for this one is going to be 12005. I need to give it a password. And volume mapping. So in this case, it wasn't there by default. So I'm going to tell that I want to map one and I want to set it up. So I go ahead and pick my volume, say volume, writable, go down to MySQL, and everything else looks good. Deploy that one. Give that one a second. It's going to download that image. So it's going to be a little bit different for the sizes of each image for how long it takes, but we'll take a look at once you have these done. You don't have to normally do very much after that. So as we look at the, let's see, it's almost done, but we'll go check out the network here in a minute. Okay, so that one's deployed. It's up and running. Unless there's something goes wrong, it's going to keep running. So as we look at our different things, so we have images, right? We can go look at that list of images. I have these filtered right now to unused images. So let's go ahead and show everything. And here's our images. So here's our Microsoft image for SQL Server. We can see that one was 1.4 gigabytes. That's why it took a little bit longer than the other ones. The next large one we have was MySQL at 546 megabytes. You can see all these images. So they get stored on the server until you go and delete them. So anytime you say I was to go back to containers and then select my MySQL server here, I could remove this one. It's going to ask automatically remove persistent volumes. I'm not going to kill the volume, but I'm going to go ahead and say remove the container. And that container is gone. So I can't restart it, can't do anything because I completely removed it now. Although the image is still available on the server. So now when I go back to app templates and I set this back up, with my options, and I go deploy it again, you see it deployed practically instantly there, right? That's the cool thing about containers. Once you have those images on your server, you don't have to refetch them again unless you delete them from the server. And the good thing is here, I can go back to images. I can see that all of these are actually being utilized. So if I go ahead and filter to unused, none of them show up in my filter. Same thing with networks here. So I can go here and look. So we still only have the two networks that are created with Docker. When you start for the first time, you have the bridge network and then you have the host network. I can go to the bridge here and I can see all the different things that are inside this network. So MySQL, Redis, Mongo, MySQL, and Portainer. They're all inside there. They have different IPs, so they can reach each other. Because they're all part of the same network. I can go to my volumes too. I have one that's not being utilized. Oh, because I ended up creating one, that's why. Oh, that's what this one is. Nope, that's the Mongo one. Did my container still running? Looks like, oh, it's still starting up. Oh, I can't use that password, that's why. Okay, whoops, forgot that. This one has a stricter password requirement. So I want to change my password there. So here's a good example of I can go ahead and select that one. I can remove it. Okay, that's done. I can go back to my template here and redeploy it again. Pick a different password this time. So let's go ahead and do that one. And I'm just about done here. Welcome back. So we're done deploying that MySQL server again. So it's starting back up here. Should be good to go. Just give it a minute. But while that's happening, let's go ahead and move on. All right. So there's a couple more databases I want to deploy inside of my sandbox environment here. All right. So go back up here and there's two others I want to deploy. I want to deploy a Elasticsearch database with the Kibana front end as well. And then I would like to deploy a Apache Cassandra database and set up a database for that too. So these two are going to be different. As we scroll down the list here, we can see there's no pre-created template in here. So we're going to have to do this one a little bit different. And you know what? We'll go ahead and call, this one's gotten pretty long, so we'll go ahead and save this, and we'll look at what's needed in order to create our own custom templates. And you can see here I have a list of them already that I've created. And we'll go through each of those on how you create them and set them up so you can get them running yourself. And I'll catch you in the next video for that one.